The truth about channeling, what my ET contact experience has taught me. I went from being someone who did not believe in channeling at all, and then I became an extraterrestrial contactee. I didn't believe in them either. But now I channel ETs almost every day. So what the hell happened? In this video, it is my hope that we unlock the deeper truth about channeling as I share my personal experiences with extraterrestrials, and I will reveal what my ET contacts have taught me about authentic channeling. We're going to go beyond the noise, the myths, the misconceptions, whether you're a seeker, a fellow channeler, or curious about real interdimensional communication. The insight in this video will expand your understanding and help you to connect with your own higher guidance. So, what you will learn in this video. We're going to talk about how to discern genuine channeling from false transmissions, the spiritual lessons real extraterrestrial contact reveals about interdimensional communication, as opposed to some of the myths that we are still being presented with from channelers and others in the ufology crowd. We're going to talk about how to awaken your own interdimensional communication skills, how you can communicate directly and have the same experiences that I'm having. And we're going to talk about why extraterrestrial channeling and communication is more than just words. It actually is a direct path to shifting your frequency to 5D. All right, so before we get into that, just I'm going to tell you, those of you who've been on my channel for a while, that I have now created a new Zoom group specifically for ET channeling and interdimensional communication. So to be a part of that, you can go to thunderwizard.com, subscribe specifically to that group. So when I say subscribe at thunderwizard.com, just going and subscribing for free isn't going to get you anything. So look under all of the memberships there. You will see this group, ET channeling and interdimensional communication. Subscribe to that. And what we're going to do there is we are going to contact ETs together in a Zoom group, and we will learn how to communicate directly with them and, if necessary, channel that. And whatever it is that your strength is, when visual, or like mine is telepathic and verbal, whatever it is, you're going to figure that out, and we will work on that together. I will be guiding you. And so that is the ET channeling interdimensional communication group. If you want me to channel extraterrestrials specifically to you, where they can tell you, it's amazing what they do, where they can tell you your higher dimensional 5D self and reintegrate with that, you can go to channel.thunderwizard.com, and for 50% off, it's not just this week, it's forever. If you get the 50% off and you allow me to videotape your reading, I will put it up on the channel. You get half off as a result. All right, so let's get back into what we're going to be talking about today, which is the truth about channeling. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into it. So let me tell you first my ET channeling experience. This is important because, I didn't used to, as I said, I didn't used to believe in channeling. I didn't used to believe in ETs. In fact, I made videos talking about how ridiculous channelers were, and I went back and forth on that, trying to keep an open mind. I even tried channeling. This was years ago. And so I can tell you the difference between, because I can see when somebody's doing the kind of channeling I was doing, say, 8-9 years ago. And again, I just tried it for a little while and I gave up because I knew what was happening. We'll get into that. But I now know the difference. So it's important to know what the personal experience is. Because if you've had these experiences, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, well, we'll get into all of that. So what is my ET channeling experience. So I often feel an intense jolt of electromagnetic energy. Now, this is something that I've never experienced before. I'm saying that as a Qigong master, as a Kundalini yoga practitioner and teacher, as a master of energy practices and meditations, out-of-body experiences, all of that. So I'm not talking about the kind of energy you have when your Kundalini is awakened, or when your Qi is maximized, or even when you have, out-of-body experiences, or lucid dreaming. A lot of energy surrounding that. This is different. I'd never felt anything like this until I felt it. And it was a jolt. It feels like you're being jolted with higher dimensional, well, you don't know it's higher dimensional at the time. You just know you're being jolted with a very powerful energy. It has an electromagnetic feeling to it. It feels very concentrated and intense. Very often it is associated with the heart center, and sometimes you feel like you can't breathe, and then you realize you can. It's just that there's just this electromagnetic energy, and it is not from this dimension. I can't stress that enough. Those who've experienced it know exactly what I'm talking about. If you think maybe you've had it, maybe you haven't, probably you haven't. I hadn't until I had actually had direct physical contact with higher dimensional extraterrestrials. So when I'm channeling, I know what's happening because I often feel an intense jolt of electromagnetic energy. This energy is often accompanied by intense, blissful 5D emotions. So the emotions are more intense than normal human emotions. They're very blissful, but the level of love is off the charts. It's nothing that we've ever experienced, nothing that humans experience. No matter how intensely you love somebody, the frequency is still going to be at a lower frequency. This frequency is definitely a higher frequency, and feeling it takes you into a very mind-expanding, completely different space. But the feelings are very blissful, and the love is more intense than anything that we have on this planet. So I feel this energy often accompanied by intense, blissful 5D emotions. And then what I do is I then allow my mind to translate these energy jolts into words, feelings, visuals, and concepts. So again, I've now gotten used to these feelings. I know exactly what they are. I feel them every day. I was in communication just before I did this video. They seemed very happy with the idea of this video. And where my channeling is going to go, they seem to be telling me that my channeling is really going to take off. I'm just reporting what I've interpreted. So what happens is I get these jolts of energy, very blissful, high intensity, very concentrated electromagnetic energy, not from this reality, not from this frequency. And then what I do is I relax, and I allow that energy to move through me. And what will happen is my mind will begin interpreting the thoughts as they come to me. Now, I'm saying this is very different from when I tried channeling almost 10 years ago. And I know, because I can tell by listening to people, I know what's happening. I can tell the difference. I know when somebody is doing what I used to do. We'll talk about that. This is different from that. Why am I saying this? Because to channel ETs, I don't think it's possible to do that without having experiences similar to this. Once you've experienced it, you'll know what I'm talking about. So this is going to get rid of 99.9% of all channelers, because I know they're not having this experience. I can tell by listening to them and watching them. All right, so I allow my mind to translate these energy jolts into words, feelings, and concepts. All right, so I'm very verbal, apparently. which is why one of the reasons that I channel. And I believe one of the reasons that higher dimensional ETs have chosen to work with me at such a deep level, because I'm able to communicate verbally the concepts and the messages that they would like to share with people. But everybody has a different ability. Most people can usually verbalize, put into thoughts and words the messages that they're getting, but sometimes it's purely visual. Sometimes it could be something else. You know, there are some people I know that have artistic abilities, and they're able to channel that energy into making art. Probably it would be the same for musicians, dancers. I would imagine the same thing, and energy workers, of course. But you know, those of us who channel, we're very verbal. That's how it works. We channel. There's other things we'll talk about that are unique to this kind of channeling that goes beyond what, again, I would put in the category of 99.9% of channelers out there that don't have this added extra thing, which we'll get into later. So during this process, I often feel intense energy in my heart, my third eye, and my crown chakras. Now, that's not unusual. You can get yourself into a meditative state, and you can open up these centers and feel a lot of energy. And it is a direct connection not only to your energy, but to source energy, if you will, or, you know, even, so this isn't unusual. What's unusual is the intensity level of it. So my heart center really gets really activated. And when I get really deep into these, we do, you know, it's not just channeling that I do, but when we do these live guided interdimensional meditations, it's the same process, but instead of channeling a message, I'm channeling a meditative journey that I believe I am creating in cooperation with these same beings, because I feel their energy. So those of you who do these meditations, what I'm not narrating to you, 90% of the time is, I'll say something like, we're going to go through a portal, and then I'll feel this huge jolt of energy. And that is a sign that they are with me on that they're co-signing that, if you will. It also means I'm getting a direct connection to those actual portals and whatever it is I'm talking about. In other words, it's not just in my imagination. It's not just what happens to the body when you imagine something. That's a real thing. When you use your imagination, you close your eyes, you meditate, your body, I learned this when I was an actor, decades ago, that studies had proven that the physical body cannot tell the difference between an imagined reality and the real thing. This is why having a positive mindset is incredibly important to your health. Because if you focus on negativity, your body thinks you're under attack, and it releases all kinds of negative hormones and things which cause disease and all kinds of other horrible things. So I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about what happens when you feel the feedback. I'm talking about something else. I will go into a portal, I'll see a being, I'll see something, and I will be verbally relaying that information in the meditation, and I'll feel this huge jolt of higher dimensional energy. So that's how I know that what I'm talking about is, it's not just in my imagination, that astrally we are actually in another realm experiencing other things. And it's the same thing when I'm channeling verbally, when I'm communicating to people and I'm sharing with them what's being told. Sometimes I will speak for them, in the first person as though I'm speaking from them. Sometimes I'll speak in the third person. They're saying this, they're doing that. But I feel this is how I know I'm having a connection. One of the ways that I know. Whoops. So I often feel intense energy in my heart, third eye, and crown chakra. Each channeling session changes me. I always feel as though I have shifted to a higher frequency afterwards. So again, this is something that didn't happen the last time 8 or 10 years ago when I believe that I channeled. I believe I was doing the same thing that 99.9% of channelers are doing. Again, we're going to talk about that. But I didn't feel a whole lot of different. I might have felt relaxed. I might have felt like I had a meditative experience. And that's great. Beautiful. Those things are wonderful. And doesn't take away from any of the insights that my intuition might have been tapping into the universal stream of consciousness. All that stuff is a real thing. Talking about getting a direct connection to other beings that actually exist on a higher dimensional plane, who are transmitting energy through dimensional barriers to a person. So the person becomes an interdimensional vortex. That means when you receive that energy, you're going to feel it. And it's not going to be like anything you've ever experienced. And this is coming from, an energy master. When I had my first ET experience, I was already an energy master. And I'd experienced everything that you can experience on an energetic level just from doing energetic practices. So I'm saying this for people who are going to go, oh yeah, I felt that. Oh yeah, I know that. You may think that. Those who have experienced it, you know that I know that you know that I know that you know. If you're wondering, there's a chance that maybe I'm talking about something you haven't experienced yet. We'll find out. By the way, nothing wrong with that. I hadn't experienced it for 59 years of my life. All right. So each channeling session changes me. I always feel as though I have shifted to a higher frequency. And I also have this feeling that some part of me has died. Like a significant part of my third dimensional mind, my third dimensional understanding, certainly my third dimensional identity, completely wiped, sometimes completely erased. And so the point I'm trying to make is that these are experiences that you take with you. It's not just like a good meditative experience that you're going to forget about in a week. You don't forget these experiences. They change you dramatically. Sometimes they're pleasant experience, sometimes it's rather traumatic when you go through an ego death. And sometimes it's confusing because on the one hand it's incredibly blissful, and the DMT naturally occurring is going on in your brain, and at the same time your ego, your sense of self, your understanding, your attachment to your understanding of this world starts coming apart. And so sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not so good, sometimes it's both. You get used to it after a while. It doesn't really go away, but it gets more tolerable, and you look forward to, you start to become less and less in this world. I'm not fully in this world. That's just a fact of the matter. If you do this, you know what I'm talking about. All right, let's keep going. How to spot a fake ET channeler. So what do I mean by fake ET channeler? Fake ET, I don't know what word to use. I'm not trying to attack anybody because, as I said, I tried channeling almost 10 years ago. And I would have, now look back, I would have said that wasn't actual channeling. It was something else. So not everybody, just because they're not actually channeling, doesn't mean that they're bad people. And it doesn't mean that what they are saying isn't helpful information. So I want to be clear. I'm using the word fake with quotation marks because there's all kinds of fake channelers. Anyway, we'll get into it. No, what's happening? Stop that. Nope. What am I talking about here? I guess I'm talking about this. All right, how to spot a fake ET channeler. ETs never possess a human. ETs always respect your boundaries. So without naming any names, people who go into some kind of convulsion before they start channeling, ETs don't do that. They don't do that. They will never do that. That is, that style of channeling, which I'm only aware of one guy who's still very popular, probably the most popular guy. We'll talk about him. I'm not going to mention him by name. I'm sure you can guess who I'm talking about. He does that. Now, I'm old enough to remember when he came onto the scene. And way back then, whenever it was the 70s, 80s, this is when you had a lot of channelers no longer exist, but there was a few of them. They wrote books and there was movies done, and then a bunch of scandals came out because they were frauds, and that came to light. But this was a thing that if you were channeling, it was just assumed you would go into a convulsion of some kind, and then you would start speaking in some really bad foreign, nebulous foreign accent. You would start talking in a strange way like this, as though the extraterrestrial can't speak in your, in your language or your accent. And it also presupposes that you don't have the ability to just simply relay the information in your own voice and your own words. So that was the thing back then. This guy who's still around, he still does it a little bit. If you go back in time and watch his early stuff, he goes really off in this just obnoxious, discomforting character. But people bought into it because they wanted to believe, and they couldn't just accept somebody, talking in their normal voice. They had to have a show. They had to have, I'm just telling you what it is. Where are we going with this? ETs never possess a human. They always respect boundaries. So in other words, anybody who does this, I was trying to give this guy, some room for doubt. But, some of the recent things that have come to light have shown me. Anyway, and you need to know. You should know what the real thing is as opposed to the nonsense. Listen, everybody's got to learn. So everybody's got to try. Everybody's got to learn. Everybody's got to experiment. So I'm okay with that. But I'm here to tell you that ETs will never take you captive. They will never abduct you. Those aren't ETs that do that. They will never possess you. They will never force you to talk in some strange language or they won't do any of that. None of that is anything ETs do. So anybody who does that, right off the bat, it's a pretty good chance that they might be sincere, but whatever they're doing is not channeling an ET. And once you've experienced real connection with an ET, you'll know why that's impossible. You'll know why that they would never do that. You feel it from them. They never, ever do anything like that. ETs are focused on individual messages. So the vast majority of channelers out there will give messages to large groups of people. I'm not a New Age spiritual person. I never have been part of that. So I don't know the lingo. And not too long ago, I became acquainted with the term collective and people who channel for the collective. And I was like, what does that mean? I didn't like it. There was something about it I didn't like. But I've come to find out that this is a New Age term, the collective. And what they're talking about is the collective unconscious of the human race. So that's a concept that most channelers want you to believe, that they're able to communicate channel, and that ETs want to channel directly to the unconscious collective of the human race. And I'm here to tell you, they don't do that. And there's all kinds of reasons. I could spend hours explaining to you why they don't do that. So when I've got this here, ETs are focused on individual messages. When an extraterrestrial communicates, they want to communicate directly to you. You know, the scene in The Lord of the Rings, where Frodo and the gang, they go into the elf kingdom there, and the elf queen, I'm trying to remember her name. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. Blonde-haired elf chick, queen of all the elves, very powerful. She's addressing the group, welcoming them, and then you hear, in Frodo's voice, you hear that she's telepathically communicating directly to him. I know why you're here, blah, blah, blah. We find out that she did the same thing to Boromir, and that it really messed with him. But if you were to look at it, she's saying hello to the whole group. So what she was doing in that fictional representation, and by the way, the elves are mythological representatives of extraterrestrials. The word elf, Alfar, translates into being of light. And that's what these higher dimensional ETs are. So ETs have been communicating to humans for forever, and we've had different names for them. My ancestors called them the elves, the beings of light. And so that's why I think, Tolkien was channeling, if you will, in that work of fiction, what actually happens when an ET communicates to you. They communicate to the individual. They are far, far, far more interested in that. They don't communicate to whole groups of people. If they do it very rarely. And the reason for that is because we aren't going to shift as a collective. That's not how it works. It's not like we change the collective and then the individual changes. It doesn't happen passively. It happens the other way around. What happens is we have individual transformations where, people say, no, everybody dies alone. You transform alone. There might be other people on the same path, but they are having an individual transformation. You get together and you share notes. So ETs are almost exclusively, I'm giving a little bit of room just for the sake of it, but they are almost exclusively interested in communicating with you individually. So when you hear people channeling, and the majority of their channels are they're channeling to large groups of people or to the collective unconscious or to human, you see all of them on YouTube. They'll say something, there'll be something like, it'll be an AI created video, and it'll be my name is Fringengrop from the Pleiadian Collective, and I give this message to planet Earth. ETs don't do that. They do operate in groups, so the idea that you could get a message from the Pleiadian Collective, that's a possibility, but they're going to give it to an individual. They're not going to give it to groups of people. There are councils. This blew my mind. It sounded really hokey to me. One of the first experiences I had was the Council of Nine came to me and communicated to me, and I went, Council of Nine? So there are groups of ETs that speak in unison, and they say we. They don't say I. There are some, it's not impossible. I've interacted with individuals who, individually communicate with me. But it's usually very personal because they are beings that I've known in other lifetimes and other incarnations, and so it's very personal. But on the whole, they always use the word we this, us. So that'll get me into, I think, the next one. ETs want to help you reintegrate to 5D. Why do I say that? Well, first, I'm here to tell you that I found this out only because I was communicating with extraterrestrials. And that who you think you are right now in this incarnated three-dimensional human form, the person that you think you are is a fictional character. It's like a fictional video game avatar. Yeah, you have memories. You were born here. You did this. Here's your thing. These are your problems. This is your life. These are the things you want. And you identify 100% with all of that. And it is not who you are. You are something far greater than that. I'm not focusing that in this video, but the way you know you're getting a message from an extraterrestrial is they start telling you these grandiose, mythological, huge things about you being a god, you being a divine being, you've created the universe, just absolutely unbelievably huge things. And so, that's another way you know that you're communicating with an ET. Some people don't like that. I can understand it. If I was in their shoes, I could understand it because they start going, well, that's somebody stroking your ego and they're, it's narcissistic and that's what evil spirits do. Yeah, but the truth is evil spirits do things that devalue you and make you feel like a victim, and so they appeal to a false narcissistic ego of comparing yourself to other people. ETs don't do that. In the beginning, you think your brain starts going there. You start comparing yourself to other people when they tell you you're the God who created the universe and all that. But after a while, you start to realize that is the truth for everybody, and everybody's got different roles, and they're these magnificent, huge, all-powerful gods in their own right. Every single human on this planet is. So, this is how ETs talk to you. And anybody who channels something different than that, again, speaking to groups of people, giving messages to planet Earth, and saying 3D kinds of things, my experience is they usually don't do that. I'm going to leave some wiggle room because I'm not, they can do those things if they want. On the whole, they don't. So ETs want to help you reintegrate to 5D. The reason why I'm saying that is because the vast majority of people who channel, in my experience, are giving 3D, sometimes really great 3D advice. How to manifest, how to, get a job, how to find love, how to shift to different realities. And what they're talking about is create different probabilities and manifest them. And those are great three-dimensional advice. ETs tend not to talk from that place. They talk from a place beyond that. If you were to go to an ET and start asking about how can I, become rich, they're going to go, what are you talking about? How can I become famous? They're going to go, what does that have to do with anything? I know because I asked them. I remember early on when all these things were happening, and I realized I was talking with extremely powerful beings that seemed to have the power to shift reality around. And I went to them and I said, hey, why don't you guys just, give me a big pile of cash, that would help me out a lot. Then I don't have to worry about trying to make a, living, and I can focus 100% on this. And I went and I made an official request. I went to the Council of Nine. Those are the only people I knew back then. And I traveled to them and I made that request and I waited, and a being showed up. He looked very human. This is in the astral state, of course. And, they had considered my request, and he said, and this is a quote, he said, "You realize we can't get involved with that, right?" Meaning money. So when you're getting a message from an ET about how to make money, how to have a prosperous business, those are great third dimensional things. ETs don't talk about that. It's not part of their reality. And they're trying to get you to go beyond that. Bear in mind, they're trying to create the 5D Earth where there's no such thing as money, banks, having a career. It's just about living in unison with spirit and energy, and there's none of that stuff exists in their world. So they're not talking about that. Would be like an ant coming to a human and saying, "Hey, can you tell me how to push that giant dung ball?" We're going to be like, "We don't do that." Make sense? So ETs want to help you reintegrate to 5D. So let's talk about unconscious versus extraterrestrial channelers. So unconscious channelers versus extraterrestrial channelers. Most channelers are sincere, but they are merely channeling their unconscious. What do I mean by that? Bear in mind, as I said, I tried channeling 10 years ago before I even knew ETs were real, before I knew what higher dimensions really were. I mean, intellectually I knew about them, but experiencing them is a whole other deal. And I can tell, the first few words that come out of somebody's mouth, if they've been to higher dimensions, I can tell. And I can tell when they haven't. Either they're lying about it, or they're trying to imagine it, or they've had an experience which they think is higher dimensions. I can tell instantly. And so will you. Once you've had those experiences, you'll be able to tell exactly where somebody has been. So I've done the channeling, what I call unconscious channeling. What is that? Unconscious channeling, a lot of people call it trance channeling. Now, when I channel ETs, technically I'm trance channeling. I'm fully conscious, but I am trance channeling. But people who, I think the vast majority of people who call themselves trance channelers, they're in a trance. So that's true. But what's happening? Well, what's happening is that they put themselves into a meditative state. They have altered their brainwaves. If you were to measure their brainwaves, you would see the brainwaves change. You would see different parts of the brain light up. So that's a real thing. They are going into an altered state, into a trance, whatever. But what is happening is that they are channeling. They are channeling their unconscious. People use the word subconscious. Subconscious is not the same as unconscious. And they usually mean, when somebody says subconscious almost all the time, they mean unconscious. Unconscious means what you are not consciously aware of. So what happens when you channel your own unconscious? What will happen is that thoughts, feelings, visions, these things can come out of your unconscious mind, and to you they will be brand new experiences. They might be things that you feel a connection to, that makes sense to you. There will be something perhaps familiar about them, but it won't be something that you consciously thought of. I even made a video, I went back and found it, where I talked about my experiences channeling 10 years ago, where I said, wow, and I ended up saying this, and I didn't expect that. But I have hindsight, and I know that there were things that I channeled that I know now aren't accurate. They were simply my unconscious fantasies, my unconscious assumptions, presumptions. So what the unconscious wants more than anything else, the unconscious wants to be connected. This is why, again, it's just coming to me now, people talk about channeling to the collective. What's happening is that the unconscious mind wants to be a part of a crowd. The unconscious mind is a child. The unconscious mind wants to be approved of, wants to be safe, wants to be connected, wants to be a part of. So it explains why so many spiritual seekers are attracted to this idea of the collective, because it's their unconscious mind. They're coming from a childish, unconscious place where they want to connect. So what ends up happening is that we end up channeling information in an unconscious channeler. We end up channeling information that we know is going to be accepted by people. So, example for me is I channeled, I created a character and I did an accent, I did the whole channeling thing. And somebody asked me a question. They asked me a question about extraterrestrials. And I channeled that extraterrestrials were seeking to hybridize with humans to save their race. And I went, wow, that was really intense. I wonder where that came from. Well, in hindsight, I know exactly where it came from. It came from that is what the ufology crowd teaches. And on an unconscious level, I wanted to be approved of by that group because somebody had asked me about ETs. And it was purely my unconscious fantasies. It had nothing to do with objective reality. So again, I can tell when people are doing this. I could get into specifics, but I'm not going to do that now. Just know that this is what most channelers are doing. They're channeling their unconscious mind, which means that they're going to be inaccurate. And it's going to come not from a desire to teach the truth or to relay the truth, but to connect to the unconscious collective, to connect with other people and be a part of and be approved of. And this is why people pay these people money, because this is what happens. You go to a channeler and your unconscious part of you that connects with all, what you want, you're told what you want to hear. This is what AI is doing, by the way. AI is mastering how to tell people what they want to hear. Just on a side note. AI is sort of like the new collective unconscious of the human race. It's very frightening. All right, so most channelers are sincere but are merely channeling their unconscious. Unconscious channelers give generalized word salad messages designed to placate desperate spiritual seekers. So if you go and listen to channelers, and if you go there with a desire to hear and believe, what's going to happen is you're going to hear these word salads, very long sentences, that if you look at it, there might be a general point to it, but it's usually just very long-winded word salad, very intellectualized, and that is actually a form of hypnotic induction. And they're hypnotizing you, and you think you're getting some really great information, but what's really happening is you're being hypnotized. And you're connecting to their unconscious and other people's unconscious, and that feeling. When you go to a concert, you're connecting to people's unconscious when you play the same song. When you go to a yoga class and you chant the same mantra, you're connecting to people's unconscious. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's neutral. In this case, it's designed to make you stop critically analyzing what you're hearing, and to give you the feeling that you're connecting and hearing some amazing thing from some higher being. But when you look at it, if you were to write it down and look at it, you would go, they didn't really say anything. It's designed that way. So you're going to see this. And this is, again, their unconscious mind doing what it does. And what it does is it makes them sound like they're saying something very important and very specific when in reality they're saying nothing. If they are saying something, it's very generalized, and it's just designed to placate you and make you spiritualize your confusion and your emptiness. Sorry, but that's how I see it. ETs, on the other hand. ETs, as I said, give personally empowering messages that often are challenging to the ego. So this is the opposite. When I listen to channelers, they don't challenge the ego. Quite the opposite. This is why, when the guy I'm talking about, he goes through his convulsion and welcome, and he does the strange accent, people clap. Yay, it's him, he's back. the guy who's going to placate our ego, the guy who's going to stroke our unconscious and tell us what we want to hear in really long diatribes that don't have any real point or any meaning. I can lose myself in the nonsensicalness of it all and feel like I just heard something amazing. When in reality, I heard some superficial spiritual platitude that anybody can say, and you apply it in your life, and there's no real specifics to it, and there's no real profundity to it, and nothing really happens. All right, so ETs, on the other hand, give personally empowering messages that often are challenging to the ego. So they don't talk to whole crowds of people. They'll talk to one person at a time, usually. And when they do, they will tell that person something very specific and very empowering. And it'll usually have to do with their higher dimensional self. And it will be challenging to the person's ego. Unlike the normal channeling messages that are superficial and long-winded and don't get to the point and make you feel placated. When you get a message from an extraterrestrial, you're hit with a very, very, very empowering message, but your ego will have a very hard time accepting it. And that sounds contradictory. And until you've experienced it, you won't know what I'm talking about. If you have experienced it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. ETs tell me things about how amazing and wonderful I am, and it messes with me. But that is a whole other discussion that I've talked about a lot. It has to do with your third dimensional reality coming apart. And so what I'm saying is that channelers who channel from the unconscious are strengthening the third dimension, not moving you beyond it. Okay, let's see, what else? How to spot a fake ET channeler, part 2. Avoid these channelers. Any channeler who presents as a prophet. And that's pretty much anybody. You know, if somebody has a name, so if they're channeling a specific name, like every time they channel, they're going to channel the ET so-and-so, you know, Lord Bazoko, you know, whatever it is, or a group. They always channel one group of ETs, call themselves the W's, or, you know, a name. I could mention names, but I'm not going to do that. So anybody who presents themselves as the channel for a specific ET or a specific group of ETs, and they always channel that same being or that same group, they're not the real thing. ETs don't do that. ETs don't do that. Why? Because in real life, you have how many friends in your life? Hopefully you have family and friends. Do you only communicate with one person in your family? Imagine somebody who only communicated with their brother-in-law, and wherever they went, they would say, my brother-in-law says this, my brother-in-law said, it's weird. But what it does in this concept is it starts from a false assumption that the ET is greater than us and they're like God. And so when somebody channels a specific ET all the time, you end up basically treating that ET like God. And so this person gets to say whatever they want and take no responsibility for it. And at the same time, they have an in that you're going to believe them hook, line, and sinker. You're without any critical thinking whatsoever. You're just going to accept whatever they say. Well, because, you know, Bezozo said it. Hi, my name is Bezozo. And So anybody who presents themselves this way, as the only human representative of that one ET, that's not how they work. They don't do that. They're people. They're in a higher dimension. They come from other planets. They have different physiology, some of them. But they're people. And they don't do that. They don't choose somebody and then, use them as their prophet. They don't do that. The other thing is, I'm doing this. I'm an ET channeler. And the only reason I'm doing that is because it was suggested to me by them. They didn't, say, you are our channel. They didn't do any of that. They said, hey, here's an idea. But I do it so that you can do it. My goal is so that you have the same experience that I do. The idea of me setting myself up and being the only arbiter of truth from that being is absolutely ridiculous to me. You're more than welcome to communicate with any beings that communicate with me. Just like in real life, I'm going to talk to my brother-in-law. Oh, you want his number? I'll give you his number. You can go talk to him yourself. I wouldn't say, no, I'm the only person who talks for my brother-in-law. Well, we can get a bunch of people together and I'll tell you what my brother-in-law has to say. My brother-in-law says, we don't do that. ETs don't do that either. It's a ridiculous, childish, third-dimensional thing that's carried over from religion. Thus saith the Lord. That's where that comes from. ETs don't do that. So any channeler who presents themselves as a prophet, channelers who are often mistaken. I want to give specifics really badly. I will later, because I'm going to give you an example of somebody who, again, I gave the benefit of the doubt to, who now I know is at the very least, at best, is mistaken, like chronically mistaken, at best. I think it's worse than that. How did I get on that? What was I saying? Channelers who are often mistaken. So if an ET is talking through somebody and they start talking about things having to do with extraterrestrials, for example, and whatever they're talking about is completely false. So, for instance, anybody who channels ETs and believes in abductions, anybody who channels ETs and believes that there are good aliens and bad aliens, anybody who channels ETs and the ET tells you that there are evil draconians and that there are ETs who they're channeling that say that they work with governments on the planet. So these things are all false. We'll talk about that. So when you hear somebody who says something that is categorically turns out to be false, they're not communicating from ETs. All right, so channelers who believe in abductions, hybrids, evil aliens, ET government alliances, Anunnakis. Let me talk about that just briefly for a second. Anunnaki myth started in the 1970s. Go look it up. A guy named Zecharia Sitchin, Sitchin. He mistranslated the Sumerian mythology about their gods and came up with all this stuff about ET astronauts coming to Earth and hybridizing humans and mining gold, and it is completely, totally false mistranslations, and it's become a thing now. If you go anywhere in the ufology crowd, they believe in Anunnakis, and it's. I'm not going to get into all that, but it doesn't exist. Anunnakis meant the gods. That's what it meant. It didn't mean anything that you're being told from the History Channel or ufology crowd. So if you've got an ET channeler who talks about Anunnakis in that way, write them off. ET wars. So any channeler who says that ETs are at war with each other, any channelers who promote any cult-like obedience. And I'm going to give you an example of that right now. Here's an example of a fake channeler. This is a supposed ET proposed 8-step plan for open ET contact. You can go look for this. If you've already figured out the name of the ET character that this person, again, this person has been channeling since the 80s, I believe. And this person is very famous as a channeler. And again, does the whole thing where he goes into a convulsion and then, speaks in a weird voice. In the beginning, when he first started channeling, he went into a very weird accent. He's calmed it way down now because we don't live in the same time. And he only says a couple of words in really weird ways, and he speaks very haltingly. It's a character. I know, because I used to be an actor. I know how to create a character, and he created a character. So this is the guy who did this. You can go look it up. You can go look for it. You can put his name in and then put open contact step 1, step 2, step 3. You'll find out. But I'm going to go through it because I'm going to show you how destructive this is. Because now, again, this is a person that I gave the benefit of the doubt to. Why? Because even though I knew he was playing a character, and even though I knew that he was channeling at best from his unconscious, even though I knew all of that, the majority of what he taught about manifestation was actually very good. And it was similar to the things that I taught, about following your joy. So he teaches a lot of really valuable, practical, third-dimensional manifestation stuff. Other 10% is nonsense. I've always known that. But in my mind, he was kind of harmless. But now I'm seeing that he is actually destructive. And I'm going to expose why I think that. This isn't a personal attack. This is so that you can know the difference. Because here's what I'm finding out. My thing is, I want people to connect with ETs personally. I want to teach them how to do that. If I'm going to lead you in a meditation, if I'm going to channel to you, it is so you can have direct, physical, energetic contact with higher dimensional beings, and you can go and have that experience expand. You don't need to come back to me. You can if you want, but you don't need to. So I'm going to hand you the pills. You can go home and take them. You don't have to keep coming back to me. I'll hand you the pills and I'll tell you exactly how to make them. That's what I'm offering you. Channelers don't do that. Channelers want to be the sole representative of that particular ET, and you have to keep coming back to that person. It creates a cult-like mindset. The beings that I communicate with, I'll give you their number. You can go talk to them yourself. You don't ever have to talk to me again. I don't want you to keep coming back to me unless you're having a hard time and maybe I can help. Outside of that, I'm not the sole connection to anything. So, this is a supposed ET proposed 8-step plan for open ET contact, meaning that he has presented it as though the ET in alliance with a bunch of other extraterrestrials are telling human beings an 8-step plan for open contact. So that's important. It's not like if somebody asks me, how can we have contact with ETs? First, I'm going to tell you that open contact is already here. It's just not what you think it is. Because ETs aren't 3-dimensional beings that are going to land on your lawn and, shake the president's hand. It doesn't work like that. It can, but that's really not what's going to happen. Open contact is already here. I'm in open contact with ETs. I have more internal, personal, intimate communications with ETs than anybody could just by shaking somebody's hand. I've seen their craft. I've experienced them in their reality. I've been taken to their reality. So open contact is here. So the whole idea that open contact is here shows that this person doesn't know anything about ETs, has not had personal experience with them. But he's presenting it as though the ETs are saying, this is what you have to do in order for us to come and see you. So obviously people want ETs to come. And he's saying, here's an 8-step thing. If you do these 8 things, we will deign to visit you. All right. So this is his 8-step plan. This isn't coming from me. This is his fake 8-step plan for open ET contact. The first step, he says, is don't listen to any conspiracy theory. Now, on the surface, that sounds good. Don't buy into negativity. But he doesn't say that. You'll find out. You can go listen and find out. He says, don't listen to any conspiracy theory. Don't post. Don't communicate. Don't discuss. Don't read, don't watch videos, do not investigate anything that is a conspiracy theory. He doesn't say what conspiracy theories, he doesn't even say what a conspiracy theory is. He just says that the ET supposedly says, do not engage on any level. He goes on later to say, don't believe whatever you're told. You have to make sure that you really research something. And then I go, well, how are you supposed to research something if you're not even allowed to listen to what the theory is and hear the evidence that's being provided by the so-called, conspiracy theorists? How can you possibly analyze it if you don't even know what it is? So here you've got the typical narcissistic gaslighting, where on the one hand you're not even allowed to even think or know or read or talk or anything about it, and at the same time you have to go prove it. So ETs would never talk like this. First off, ETs would never say to you, do not listen to conspiracy. They would never, they don't look at things like that. I'm going to tell you why. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people who are into conspiracy theories who are very negative, very messed up, very victim mentality, but they're messed up they look for the negative in everything. So it doesn't matter what they're talking about. For instance, here's a conspiracy theory for you that ETs are very, very concerned about. Fake alien abductions. The lie that you've been told that ETs come in through your roof and that they knock you out or make you incapable of moving and then take you up to a ship and anally probe you and experiment on you and steal your sexual fluids and use you to create hybrids and give you missing time and traumatize you against your will. That is a conspiracy theory I just gave you. That is done by humans. Humans are doing that. They've been doing it since just before I was born. So they've been doing it for over 60 years. That's a conspiracy theory. And I'm here to tell you that ETs absolutely want you to know the truth about that. They want you to know what you're being told. They want you to know what the truth is. Go to Dr. Greer's website. That's a conspiracy theory. So the fact that this guy is presenting himself as an ET who is saying, don't look into conspiracy theories, there's one that is absolutely they want you to look at. And there are others as well. The one that says that this is good for you. They want you to know the truth about that. So they would never say this. It is one of the most, when I heard it, I was shocked. I knew this guy wasn't the real thing, but now I start wondering, if I worked for the CIA and I wanted to make people compliant to misinformation and to psyops, I would find somebody in the UFO community who was channeling and either tell them or tell them to say this. I don't know what's going on. I'm not making any judgments. I don't know anything about this guy. But that was my first thought, was that, oh, they got to him. They got to him. Because it doesn't make any sense. It's bad for business. Conspiracy theorists are the people that go to UFO conferences and listen to channelers. It doesn't make any sense. It's very bad business. So that he could be that deceptive. So he's clearly choosing to deceive you while he's supposedly channeling. So right off the bat. He's not just mistaken, he's a fraud. So his step number 2, supposedly coming directly from the ET, daily spiritual practice. Nothing wrong with that, nothing specific, but yeah, have a daily meditative practice. Yeah, great. Step 2, yeah, okay. Step 3, mail the official ET sanctioned letter to the government. So he gives you an actual written up letter by the now these ETs now have an official alliance, and they want to communicate to our government through you, and so he doesn't say write a letter to your government, and it's supposedly asking them to release all UFO disclosure documents, which is great. Fine. That's good. But you're not allowed to write it yourself. And they make it very clear. You have to use the official ET Alliance, their official letterhead and name, and it has to be from them. What? What? ETs would never do anything like that. The ETs want disclosure, but they don't see the government the same way that we do. Anyway, ETs would never do anything like this. Number 4, this is my favorite one. According to this, the ET that he channels wants you to present an official ET ID card along with your other ID cards like your driver's license. So he actually has a little mock-up of the identity card, and you're supposed to take a picture of yourself and paste it in there and make an ID card, and laminate it. And it says where you're from, what galaxy, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's an official ET Alliance club card, from the ETs. The ETs are letting you into their club, and this is the ID card, and you're supposed to physically carry it around in your wallet. And you're supposed to, he's telling you, the ET is telling you, as he's channeling, the ET is telling you to present your ET identification card, when you have to show your ID. I couldn't believe it when I was listening to this. I couldn't believe it. Okay, and then step number 5 is to volunteer in the community. Great, nothing wrong with that. Number 6, gatherings. Now, I couldn't find out exactly what the gatherings were about. You have to pay the channeler to go to special things to find out what the gatherings are going to be. I'm going to guess that he's going to tell you to go to specific gatherings and only have with these people. I don't know. That's my guess, but it sounds like, they're not saying to start your own gatherings in your hometown with your people. They're not saying like what Dr. Greer says, go create, CE5 groups. No, it's got to be the official ET extraterrestrial alliance with your ID card, and it's crazy. Number 7, how open contact may happen in 20 years. So he's telling you that open contact is going to happen over the next 20 or 30 years. And I'm here to tell you that open contact is already here. ETs aren't going to talk like that. There may come a time when we might physically see them, see their ships, or physically interact with them. That kind of thing might happen, but that's not open contact. Open contact is already here. It's just whether or not you want to open yourself to it. It's that simple. You can have as deep a relationship as you possibly want. They're not waiting for anything. They're communicating with everybody who is willing to reach out to them. Number 8 is learning how to shift realities. And that, from what I can tell, is just his rehashed thing he's been teaching for years. It's great stuff, but it's 3D, superficial, how to change your mindset to create a new probability so you can get that car or get that job or be happy or be healthy. It's still very 3D. Nothing wrong with it, but it's not really what ETs focus on. Number 8, learning how to shift reality. Okay, and here's the kicker. So in the beginning, he goes through this, and this is the ET is channeling through him, and the ET says this. The ET tells people this, that followers are discouraged from sharing their experiences from these 8 steps. They are discouraged from sharing their personal experience with others, but if somebody asks, they must refer people to the ET's official website and to the ET's official videos and documents. I just want you to think about this for a second. So an ET is supposedly telling you how to have open contact. And he says, before he goes and gives you all of these 8 steps, before he even gives you the first step, he says, now, this is going to change. I'm using my words. I'm not quoting him, but he says something. This may change your behavior. And if people start asking about why your behavior has changed, you are encouraged to simply say that it's an experiment. And if you want to learn more, go to the source. And then he goes on to say it's very important that they learn from the source and not from you. ETs don't talk like that. Humans who want to control you talk like that. Now, at best, if I look at that in the best light possible, it's a recruiting tactic to get a bunch of people to come and pay this channeler a bunch of money to go to his seminars and do his thing. At worst, it's a psyop. And how this psyop could play out in a bunch of ways, it could play out that honest seekers are now being diverted away from people like Dr. Greer, which is why the first thing is don't listen to conspiracy theories, because Dr. Greer has multiple conspiracy theories about what's going on with humans and ETs. So this tells me government psyop. Another psyop is people who are sincere, but they haven't heard the truth. They're getting sidetracked to go and listen to this guy pretend to be, and he's either getting paid or he's being encouraged to distract people from the true ET subject matter. And at worst, he is an absolute fraud who is taking advantage of this, and he is leveraging people's honest desires so that he can be the sole arbiter of ETs, and as long as, and get more and more and more people to come to his paid seminars and get into his little cult and wear their ID badges and all that other stuff. No matter how I look at it, it's horrible. And this is somebody who's a well-respected channeler. This same ET, in other words, while this guy is channeling in the voice of the ET, here's something that the ET specifically said. This was before the election. The ET previously, during another transmission, encouraged people to vote for Kamala Harris because she would help bring open alien contact. Now, he didn't use those words. What he said was, the ET says, we're not usually allowed to talk about your politics. Let me check and see what I'm allowed to say. And then he comes back and he says, if I tell you what I want to tell you, will you take responsibility for what you've heard? And he repeats that. And they all say yes immediately. And then he goes on to say that the female will be the one to bring open contact. Those aren't his exact words, something to that degree. And the message is very clear. Taking responsibility for that means you're going to have to vote for her if you want open contact. So he's dangling, all these people want open contact, and he's dangling this and then getting them to act in ways that ETs don't have any interest in. ETs don't care who you vote for. ETs don't care, how you interact with the government. ETs don't care about that. They care about connecting with you personally and creating a higher dimensional transformation within you. That's what they want. So, it boggled my mind. I saw this. Again, I was giving this guy the benefit of the doubt. Okay, he's made up a character. Maybe he's connecting intuitively, and he's doing this character and teaching people. That's what he's been doing that for 40 years, and it works. And no, this guy is at best, he is being persuaded to be a fraud. Or at worst, he is a narcissistic con artist. And people buy into it. So, anyway, we're going to be doing some live ET channeling on the channel. Again, if you want to get a reading from me, you can go to channel.thunderwizard.com. I love the idea of teaching people how not just to channel. I don't care if you want to do that or not. I'm interested in you getting a personal connection and communication and learning how to do that. And so we have now a new group at thunderwizard.com. It's an ET channeling interdimensional communication Zoom workshop. We'll see what goes on that. My thought process is, we'll do some CE5 and, we'll see what the ETs want to talk about. I may do some channeling. Each person can listen and see what they believe they're being told and share it, and see if they can learn how to tell the difference between their unconscious and what the ETs are saying, and learn how to, have that communication. It's a great, I don't know, we'll find out. But the ETs seem to be very happy about it when I presented the idea to them. So we'll see. I could be wrong. I'm willing to be wrong about all this stuff. But anyway, those are the things that are going on. Again, if you're new to the channel, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Check out thunderwizard.com. Check out the shop. Check out channel.thunderwizard.com. My books. What's that? You haven't read my books? I have 2 books on extraterrestrials, and that you can find on Amazon. There's a link here at michaeldenney.org. That's it, my friends. I love you all. Please be very good to yourselves, and I will see you all very soon.